A sour note. US tariffs threaten South African citrus. The US is considering slapping tariffs on South African citrus. This could be a big problem for South Africa's citrus farmers. They rely heavily on exporting their oranges, lemons and grapefruits to the US. These tariffs could make their fruit more expensive in the US. American consumers might buy less. This could hurt South African farmers and the people they employ. This trade tension comes at a delicate time. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, is up for renewal. AGOA is a trade deal that allows South Africa to sell certain goods to the US without paying tariffs. If AGOA isn't renewed, things could get even tougher for South African citrus. It's a tense situation. The livelihoods of thousands of South Africans hang in the balance. The citrus industry is a major employer, especially in rural areas. The threat of these tariffs is causing a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. The US government says it's considering these tariffs for a reason. They're concerned about South Africa's relationship with countries like China and Russia. They're also worried about South Africa's land reform policies. But are these tariffs the right way to address those concerns? Let's break it down. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, has been a lifeline for many African countries, including South Africa. This trade deal, signed in 2000, allows eligible countries in sub-Saharan Africa to export certain goods to the US duty-free. It was designed to promote economic growth and development in Africa. For South Africa, AGOA has been particularly beneficial for the citrus industry. It has allowed South African farmers to access the vast US market without facing hefty import taxes. This has created jobs and boosted the South African economy. However, AGOA's future is uncertain. The agreement is up for renewal, and some US lawmakers have expressed concerns about South Africa's eligibility. They cite concerns about South Africa's close ties with Russia and China, as well as its land expropriation policies. The potential loss of AGOA benefits is a major concern for South African citrus farmers. It could mean losing their preferential access to the US market and facing steep tariffs. This could have a devastating impact on the industry and the livelihoods it supports. The potential US tariffs on South African citrus could have a devastating impact on jobs in both countries. In South Africa, tens of thousands of jobs are at stake. The citrus industry is a major employer, particularly in rural areas where job opportunities are scarce. If tariffs make South African citrus more expensive in the US, American consumers may opt for cheaper alternatives. This could lead to a decline in demand for South African fruit, forcing citrus farms to scale back production and lay off workers. The ripple effects would be felt throughout the South African economy. But the job losses wouldn't be limited to South Africa. The US also stands to lose jobs in sectors related to the import, distribution and sale of South African citrus. Thousands of American workers in these sectors could be impacted. This situation highlights the interconnected nature of global trade. Tariffs, while intended to protect domestic industries, can have unintended consequences for workers in both the exporting and importing countries. South Africa is a citrus powerhouse. It's the world's second largest exporter of citrus fruits after Spain. The country's sunny climate and fertile soil provide ideal conditions for growing oranges, lemons, grapefruits and other citrus varieties. The industry is a major contributor to South Africa's economy, generating billions of dollars in export revenue. The US is a key market for South African citrus. The two countries have a long history of trade, and American consumers have come to rely on South Africa for high-quality citrus fruits, especially during the US off-season. However, the potential US tariffs threaten to disrupt this mutually beneficial relationship. They could damage South Africa's reputation as a reliable supplier of citrus and make it difficult for South African exporters to compete in the US market. If South Africa loses access to the US market, it will have to find alternative markets for its citrus exports. This could prove challenging as the global citrus market is already competitive. Section 5, the land question, a legacy of inequality. To understand the current tensions between South Africa and the US, we need to look back at South Africa's history. Apartheid, the system of racial segregation and discrimination that was in place for decades, had a profound impact on land ownership in South Africa. Under apartheid, black South Africans were forcibly removed from their land and denied basic rights. The best land was given to white farmers. This created a deeply unequal society, with a small white minority owning a disproportionate amount of land. Even after the end of apartheid in 1994, the legacy of this land dispossession continued to haunt South Africa. The majority of black South Africans remained largely shut out of land ownership. This inequality fueled poverty, unemployment, and social unrest. The South African government has been under pressure to address this historical injustice. Land reform has been a key demand from the black majority, who see it as a way to redress the wrongs of the past and achieve economic justice. Section 6. Expropriation, a controversial solution. In an attempt to address the land issue, the South African government has proposed a policy of land expropriation without compensation. This policy would allow the government to seize land from private owners, without paying them market value in the interest of land reform. This policy has sparked intense debate both within South Africa and internationally. Supporters argue that it is a necessary step to correct historical injustices and provide landless black South Africans with a path to economic empowerment. They point out that the willing buyer, willing seller model of land reform, which has been in place since 1994, has been slow and ineffective. Critics, however, argue that expropriation without compensation is a violation of property rights and will deter investment in South Africa. They fear that it could lead to economic instability and damage the country's agricultural sector. The US government, under the Trump administration, expressed strong opposition to the policy, with former President Trump threatening to impose sanctions on South Africa. This further strained relations between the two countries. Section 7. International implications, a geopolitical chess game. The citrus tariff issue is not just about trade, it's also about geopolitics. The US is increasingly wary of South Africa's growing ties with Russia and China. These two countries are seen as rivals to US interests on the global stage. South Africa is part of BRICS, a group of emerging economies that includes Brazil, Russia, India, and China. This alliance is seen as a counterweight to Western-led institutions like the G7. South Africa has also deepened its military cooperation with Russia and China in recent years. The US sees these moves as a sign of South Africa's drift away from the West. Some analysts believe that the US is using the citrus tariff issue as leverage to pressure South Africa to distance itself from Russia and China. This situation highlights the complexities of international relations. Trade, diplomacy, and security are often intertwined, and decisions made in one area can have ripple effects in others. Section 8. The human cost farmers caught in the crossfire. While diplomats and politicians debate tariffs and geopolitics, it's easy to forget the human cost of these decisions. Citrus farmers in both South Africa and the US are caught in the crossfire of this trade dispute. In South Africa, many citrus farmers are already struggling to make ends meet. The rising cost of fertilizers, electricity and labor, coupled with droughts and other climate challenges, has put a strain on their businesses. The threat of US tariffs adds another layer of uncertainty and anxiety. In the US, citrus farmers have their own concerns. They argue that cheap imports from South Africa are hurting their livelihoods. They want the US government to protect them from what they see as unfair competition. This situation highlights the difficult choices that governments face when trying to balance competing interests. There are no easy answers, and any decision is likely to have both winners and losers. Section 9. The future of South African citrus, uncertainty looms. The future of South African citrus hangs in the balance. The potential US tariffs, coupled with the uncertainty surrounding AGOA, have cast a shadow over the industry. South African citrus farmers are resilient. They have weathered many storms in the past, from droughts to economic downturns. But the current challenges are particularly daunting. The South African government is trying to find new markets for its citrus exports. It is also investing in research and development to improve the quality and competitiveness of its citrus fruits. However, the outcome of the trade dispute with the US will have a major impact on the industry's long-term prospects. If South Africa loses access to the US market, it will be a significant setback. The citrus industry is vital to the South African economy. It provides jobs, generates export revenue, and supports rural communities. The world is watching to see how this trade dispute unfolds and what it means for the future of South African citrus.